I have been an English teacher for many years, and throughout my journey, I have had the privilege of teaching students from different backgrounds, each with their own unique challenges and aspirations. My teaching philosophy has always been centered around real-life practice rather than just theoretical learning. Many students come to me after years of studying English through books, apps, and online courses, yet they struggle when it comes to real conversations. This is where my method makes a difference. Over the years, I have guided numerous students towards fluency, helping them build confidence and overcome their fears of speaking English. Some of my students have gone on to study in prestigious universities, while others have secured jobs in international companies where English is the primary language of communication. The most rewarding part of my job is witnessing the transformation that happens when a student realizes they can actually communicate in English without hesitation. One of the key elements of my teaching approach is immersing students in real-life situations where they must use English naturally. I have taken students to business meetings, networking events, and social gatherings where they were required to interact with native speakers. These experiences have always been eye-opening for them. They quickly understand that knowing English is not just about memorizing words and grammar rules, it's about being able to think and respond naturally in the language. This brings me to one of my most memorable students, Jonathan. Jonathan was an ambitious young man who had spent years studying English on his own. He had completed numerous textbooks, aced grammar exercises, and memorized thousands of words. He was confident that he knew everything he needed. When he came to me, he said, "I just need a quick review. I already know English." However, learning English is not just about knowing words on paper. It's about being able to use the language in real conversations, under pressure, and in unfamiliar situations. To show Jonathan the gap between book knowledge and practical fluency, I took him to an international company where English was the main language of communication. The experience completely changed his perspective. What happened next was a lesson not just for Jonathan, but for many students like him who believe that studying books alone is enough to master a language. This story is about his journey, his struggles, and how he ultimately found a new way to truly learn English. Through this story, I hope to inspire other learners to step out of their comfort zones and embrace the real challenges of language learning. Jonathan was a confident young man. He had studied many English books, completed grammar exercises, and memorized thousands of words. He believed he knew everything about English. When he came to me, he said, "I just need a quick review. I already know English." I smiled. I had heard this before. Many students think they know English because they can understand words on paper. But speaking and using English in real situations is different. I wanted Jonathan to see this for himself. So, I invited him to a business company where I had a contract. This company was an international import-export business. Most of the employees were native English speakers, and the office language was English. Jonathan was excited. He thought it would be easy. "This is great. I will talk with people and show my skills," he said confidently. I nodded and said, "Let's see how it goes." The next morning we arrived at the company. The office was modern, with glass doors, big desks, and employees walking around, talking in English. As we entered, a friendly receptionist smiled and said, "Good morning. How can I help you?" Jonathan opened his mouth to reply, but nothing came out. He could only say, "Hello." There was silence. I saw the confusion in his eyes. The receptionist waited, but Jonathan couldn't continue. His face turned red. He looked at me, searching for help. I smiled and answered for him, "We are here to meet Mr. Thompson." We walked further inside. People were talking, making phone calls, discussing business deals, all in fast, natural English. Jonathan listened, but he didn't understand much. He looked nervous. His hands were shaking slightly. After a few minutes, he whispered, "I don't understand anything. They speak too fast." I replied, "This is real English. This is how people speak in daily life." Jonathan stayed quiet for the rest of the visit. He listened but didn't try to speak. After 30 minutes, we left the building. Outside, he sighed. "That was terrible," he said. "I thought I knew English, but I couldn't say anything. I didn't understand them. I feel like I know nothing." He was shocked. His confidence disappeared. I could see frustration on his face. "I wasted so much time studying books. Why can't I speak?" he asked. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Now you understand the difference between learning from books and real-life practice. This is a good lesson for you, Jonathan. Don't feel bad. This is the start of something new." But Jonathan was too upset. He didn't talk to me for a few days. He stopped answering my messages. I knew he felt embarrassed and discouraged. After 3 days, I decided to visit him. When he opened the door, he looked surprised. "You came?" he asked. "Of course," I said. "I wanted to check on you." Jonathan invited me inside. He looked tired. "I feel terrible. I thought I was good, but now I see that I am not. Maybe learning English was a mistake. Maybe I should stop." I shook my head. "Jonathan, imagine if you moved to an English-speaking country today. Would you survive with only book knowledge?" He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No," he admitted. I smiled. "Then this experience was important. It opened your eyes. Now you have 2 choices: give up or start again with a better method. What will you do?" Jonathan took a deep breath. "I don't want to give up, but I don't know how to start again." I patted his shoulder. "Don't worry. I will help you. We will start from the beginning, but this time you will learn English in a new way. No more just reading books. You will practice, speak, and use English every day." Jonathan looked at me with hope. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it." And that was the beginning of Jonathan's real English journey. 3 days after our first visit to the company, I called Jonathan. This time, he answered quickly. "Are we going back to that place again?" he asked hesitantly. "Yes," I said. "But this time we will go with a plan. I will teach you a new way to learn English." Jonathan sighed. "All right, but I hope this time is not as bad as before." The next morning, we walked into the company again. The same receptionist was sitting at the front desk. When she saw us, she smiled and said, "Good morning. Nice to see you again." Jonathan froze for a second but then replied, "Good morning." This time, he didn't look completely lost. I turned to him and whispered, "Today we are going to focus on two things: active listening and imitation. You don't have to speak much. Just listen carefully and repeat what you hear." Jonathan nodded. We walked through the office and stopped near a group of employees having a conversation. I told Jonathan, "Listen to their words, their tone, and their expressions. Try to catch a few phrases." We stood there for 10 minutes. Jonathan listened closely. I could see his brain working hard. When the conversation ended, I asked, "What did you hear?" He hesitated. "I think one guy said, 'Let's finalize the contract.' And someone else said, 'I'll send you the report soon.'" I smiled. "Good. Now repeat after me. 'Let's finalize the contract.'" Jonathan repeated the sentence. I corrected his pronunciation slightly. Then, he repeated it again, this time with more confidence. We continued doing this exercise throughout the office. Jonathan listened to short phrases and repeated them. At first, he felt awkward, but soon he started enjoying it. At one point, he turned to me and said, "This is actually fun. I never learned like this before." That's because most people learn English from books, but real English is learned by listening and imitating, I explained. As we walked back toward the entrance, we passed the receptionist again. Jonathan slowed down and looked at her. I noticed something different in his expression. He liked her. Before I could say anything, he took a deep breath and said, "Excuse me, what's your name?" She looked up, surprised. "Oh, my name is Emily. And you are?" "I'm Jonathan," he said nervously. She smiled. "Nice to meet you, Jonathan." He turned to me with excitement. "I did it. I talked to her." I laughed. "Yes, you did. And this is just the beginning." Over the next week, we repeated this exercise every day. Jonathan listened to conversations, picked up phrases, and practiced imitating them. Slowly, he started understanding more. He even began answering short questions from the employees. One day, after another successful session, he turned to me and said, "This method works. I feel more confident. I want to learn more." I patted his back. "Great, but we still have a long way to go. Next, we will learn how to think in English. Are you ready?" Jonathan grinned. "Yes, let's do it." A week after Jonathan started practicing active listening and imitation, I met him at a cafe near the company. He looked more confident. His posture had changed. He smiled when he saw me and greeted me without hesitation. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, Jonathan. You look different." "More confident," I said, sitting down across from him. "How has your practice been?" Jonathan grinned. "It's working. I understand more words now. I even answered a phone call at the company yesterday. It was short, but I did it." I nodded. "That's great. Now we move to the next step. From today, you will start thinking in English." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Thinking in English? How do I do that? I took a sip of my coffee and explained, instead of thinking in your native language and then translating, you will try to think directly in English. For example, right now, if you feel thirsty, don't say in your mind, I am thirsty in your language. Just say it in English. Jonathan scratched his head. That sounds hard. I laughed. At first it is. But you can start with small steps. Right now, look around. What do you see? Jonathan looked around the cafe. He hesitated, then said, I see. A woman drinking coffee. A man is reading a book. The waiter is bringing food. Good. Now try to say it in your mind in English before speaking. Just observe and think in English. Jonathan closed his eyes for a moment and then opened them. It feels strange, but I will try. I smiled. Great. Now let's talk about your new task. You will start writing in English every day. Jonathan's eyes widened. Writing? But I'm not good at writing. I shook my head. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just a few sentences about your day. What you did, what you learned, or even what you ate. The goal is to use English in a natural way. Jonathan sighed. Okay, I will try. 2 days later, Jonathan officially started as an intern at the company. I was there to introduce him to his new supervisor, Mr. Harris. Jonathan, welcome to the team, Mr. Harris said, shaking his hand. Your job is simple. You will help with small tasks, listen to meetings, and write short reports. Jonathan nodded nervously. Okay. I will do my best. As I was leaving, I whispered to him, remember, think in English. Write a little every day. He took a deep breath. I will. The first week was tough for Jonathan. He struggled to think in English all the time. One day, during a meeting, his supervisor asked him, Jonathan, can you summarize what we discussed? Jonathan panicked. He understood some parts but wasn't sure how to explain them. His heart raced. Then, he remembered what I told him. Think in English. Keep it simple. He took a deep breath and said, the team talked about new customers and about sending emails to them. Mr. Harris smiled. Good job. Next time, try to write some notes. That night, Jonathan wrote in his notebook. Today I was in a meeting. I was nervous, but I spoke in English. I need to take notes next time. One afternoon, Jonathan went to the company kitchen to get coffee. He saw Emily, the receptionist, standing there. His heart beat faster. He wanted to talk to her. Hi, Emily, he said. She smiled. Hey, Jonathan. How's your day? He tried to think in English. My day is good. I work. No, I am working hard. Emily laughed. That's great. Are you getting used to the office? Jonathan nodded. Yes, but English is still not easy. She encouraged him. You're doing well. Keep practicing. Feeling more confident, he wanted to say, I like coffee too. But instead, he said, I like you too. Emily blinked in surprise. Jonathan's face turned red. I mean, I like coffee. I like coffee, he corrected himself quickly. Emily laughed. I understand. Don't worry. That was cute. Jonathan covered his face. I will write this in my notebook tonight. That night he wrote, I made a mistake today. I said, I like you instead of I like coffee. Emily laughed. It was embarrassing but funny. Next time, I will think before I speak. A few weeks passed. Jonathan kept practicing. He thought in English every day. He wrote in his notebook every night. One day, Mr. Harris gave him an important task. Jonathan, can you write a short email to our new client? Jonathan took a deep breath. I can do this, he told himself. He thought in English and wrote, Dear Mr. Smith, thank you for your time today. We will send you the documents tomorrow. Please let us know if you have any questions. Mr. Harris read it and smiled. Perfect, Jonathan. Jonathan felt proud. He had come a long way. Thinking in English and writing every day had changed everything. That night, he wrote in his notebook, Today I wrote my first email in English. I feel more confident. I want to learn more. Jonathan's journey of learning English continued with new challenges and exciting moments. After practicing thinking in English and daily writing, it was time for the next step, learning through movies and stories. One afternoon, Emily, the friendly receptionist, noticed Jonathan struggling with some words while reading a company email. Hey, Jonathan, you know what helps me learn new languages? Watching movies, she said with a smile. Jonathan hesitated. Movies? But I won't understand everything. Emily laughed. That's the point. You listen, watch, and pick up new words from the scenes. It's fun. In fact, why don't you come over to my place this weekend? We can watch a movie together. Jonathan's heart started beating faster. Watching a movie with Emily? That sounded amazing, but also terrifying. He had never spent time alone with her outside of work. Still, he didn't want to say no. Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Saturday evening arrived, and Jonathan found himself standing outside Emily's apartment, holding a bag of popcorn he had bought on the way. He took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Emily welcomed him with a warm smile. Come in. I picked an easy movie for you, one with lots of simple dialogue. Jonathan stepped inside. The apartment smelled like vanilla and fresh coffee. He sat on the couch as Emily dimmed the lights and started the movie. It was a romantic comedy, one of Emily's favorites. At first, Jonathan tried to focus. He repeated sentences in his head, trying to catch new words. But soon, he realized something strange. His attention kept drifting away from the screen to Emily. The way she laughed at the funny scenes, the way her eyes sparkled when she turned to him to explain a joke. He was too distracted. By the time the movie ended, Jonathan had understood almost nothing. Emily stretched and smiled. That was fun. What did you think of the movie? Jonathan panicked. He couldn't even remember the main character's name. It was good. Very interesting. Emily raised an eyebrow. You didn't understand much, did you? Jonathan sighed. Not really. I was too nervous. Emily laughed. That's okay. Watching movies alone might help you focus more. Try watching it again later, with subtitles. Jonathan nodded. He had learned something important. If he really wanted to improve, he needed to practice alone, at his own pace. The next day, Jonathan found the same movie online. He put on his headphones, turned on the subtitles, and started watching. This time, without Emily next to him, he focused better. He paused and repeated sentences, noting new words in his notebook. Little by little, he started recognizing phrases. "I get it now," he whispered to himself, feeling proud. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan made movie watching a habit. He watched different genres, comedies, dramas, even action movies. At work, he started using phrases he had heard in films. One day, when a coworker asked if he had finished a task, Jonathan casually replied, "I'm on it," a phrase he had picked up from a movie. Emily noticed his progress. "Wow, Jonathan, you sound more natural every day." He grinned. "Thanks. Movies really help. And this time, I actually understand them." One afternoon, Emily approached Jonathan with a mischievous smile. "Guess what? The company is hosting a movie night this Friday. Want to come?" Jonathan hesitated. A public movie night? What if he got distracted again? But then he remembered how much progress he had made. This was his chance to test his skills. He took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, let's do it." As Friday approached, Jonathan felt both nervous and excited. This time, he wasn't just watching a movie, he was proving to himself how far he had come. Jonathan had been working as an intern at the company for a few months. He had improved a lot, his English was better, and he felt more confident when talking to people. But he wanted more. He wanted to test his skills in a real situation. One day, during lunch break, he heard some employees talking about a business trip. The company was sending a team to another country to pick up a shipment of product. Jonathan's eyes lit up. He quickly came to me and said, "I want to go. Can you help me?" I looked at him, surprised. "Jonathan, this is not easy. You are just an intern." "I know," he said, "but this is a great chance for me. I can practice my English in a real environment. Please talk to them." I sighed. The company had strict rules. Only permanent employees could go on business trip. But I wanted to help Jonathan. I used my connections and spoke to the manager. After a long discussion, they agreed, but there was one condition. "Jonathan can go," the manager said, "but he must pay for his travel expenses." I told Jonathan the news. He didn't even hesitate. "I will do it," he said with excitement. A week later, Jonathan was at the airport, ready for his first business trip. He was excited but also nervous. This was the first time he was traveling for work, and he knew he had to use English the whole time. On the plane, he sat next to one of the senior employees. They talked a little, but Jonathan mostly listened. He remembered my lessons: active listening, imitation, thinking in English. When they arrived, they checked into a hotel. Jonathan was tired, but he knew this was a golden opportunity. He walked around the city, trying to read signs, understand people, and even order food in English. At dinner, one of the employees said, Jonathan, tomorrow we go to the warehouse. You will help with the shipment. Jonathan nodded. I am ready. The next day, Jonathan stood in a large warehouse full of boxes and workers. His job was to check the shipment and confirm the details with the suppliers. It was not easy. The workers spoke fast, and the business vocabulary was different from what he had learned before. At first, he struggled. He couldn't understand everything. He felt lost. But then, he took a deep breath and remembered something I had taught him. Don't try to translate everything. Just focus on key words. So, he listened carefully. Slowly, he started to understand. When a worker said, "We need to load these first," he got it. When someone asked, "Do you have the invoice?" he knew what to do. At one point, a supplier gave him a document and asked, "Can you confirm these quantities?" Jonathan hesitated for a second, but then he smiled and said, "Yes, let me check." He looked at the numbers and compared them to the boxes. For the first time, he felt like a real part of the team. After work, Jonathan had free time. Instead of staying in his hotel room, he decided to explore the city. He visited a local market and talked to shopkeepers. At first, he was shy, but then he remembered my lesson about thinking in English. Instead of translating, he tried to form sentences naturally. He bought souvenirs, ordered street food, and even asked for directions, all in English. One evening, he went to a cafe. A group of travelers was sitting at a nearby table. He took a deep breath and walked over. "Hi, are you guys tourists?" he asked. They smiled and invited him to sit. Jonathan was nervous, but as they talked, he realized something amazing. He was having a real conversation in English. For the first time, he wasn't just learning English. He was living it. After a few days, the trip was over. Jonathan returned home with a suitcase full of souvenirs and a heart full of memories. When he saw me, he smiled and said, "I did it. I used everything you taught me." I laughed. "So, how was it?" "It was hard at first," he admitted. "But then I started to understand. I talked to people, worked with suppliers, and even made new friends. This was the best experience ever." Jonathan's journey has come to an end. But what about you? Maybe you are just like Jonathan when he started, afraid to speak, unsure of your skills, and wondering if you will ever be fluent in English. Maybe you have studied English for years but still feel nervous when talking to native speakers. Maybe you want to learn, but you don't know where to start. Jonathan was just like that. But look at him now. He traveled to another country, worked with native speakers, and had real conversations. He started as a beginner, and now he is confident. How did he do it? He followed a simple but powerful method. And guess what? You can do it too. Jonathan didn't learn English by memorizing grammar rules. He didn't spend hours reading boring textbooks. Instead, he learned English the natural way, just like a child learns their first language. Here's how he did it. 1. Active listening and imitation. He listened carefully to real conversations. He repeated phrases and copied native speakers. 2. Thinking in English. He stopped translating in his head. Started thinking directly in English. 3. Daily writing. He wrote simple sentences every day. He used writing to organize his thoughts in English. 4. Movies and stories. He watched movies to improve listening skills. He learned words in context, not just from a dictionary. 5. Real-life experience. He used English in real situations. He practiced speaking with native speakers. This method helped Jonathan learn quickly and naturally. And it can help you too. Maybe you are thinking, but Jonathan had a teacher. I don't. That's not a problem. You have something even better, this channel. Every video I create is designed to help you learn like Jonathan. I don't just teach English. I show you how to use it in real life. Do you want to speak with confidence? Do you want to understand native speakers? Do you want to stop translating in your head? Then this method is for you. And the best part? It's fun. Learning English doesn't have to be boring. You don't need to memorize thousands of words or study grammar for hours. You just need to practice the right way. Jonathan's story is over, but your story is just beginning. If you want to learn English the way he did, stay with me. Watch my videos. Follow the lessons. Practice every day. Your English will improve faster than you think. And remember, if Jonathan could do it, so can you. So, are you ready to start your journey? Then let's do this together.